Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm very happy to welcome a special guest today, Carolyn White from Two Shoes Dance Studio. Welcome, Carolyn.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Um,
Great.
so, some of you may know Carolyn from a couple of things that she's done recently. A few months ago, she did a protest that I was invited to. And also recently, she's done a video on social media about some of the challenges that her business and her customers have been facing. But why don't we start off, Carolyn? Could you just tell us a bit about, your school and what you do and how it all started?
Um, so I grew up as a dancer and I finished up at the College of the Arts, secondary college. I did my VCE there. I left school when I was 15 to dance full time. After that, I decided to study fashion design and technology. But decided after I'd finished that to start a dance studio because I had the skills and I wanted to run my own business. So I've been running Two Shoes Dance Academy for about 9 years now. We have just the most wonderful community over in Ascot Vale and Flemington. Yeah, we've got about 200 students over there, and the kids are gorgeous, and my team are wonderful. And, we're all about, the kids coming in and having a really positive experience with their dance training.
Sounds wonderful. And we were just discussing before we came on air. I noticed that there's a two shoes dance school in Japan as well, and I saw that it was shared to Japan. And welcome to all our, if there's anyone tuning in from Japan, yoroshiku onegai shimasu, minasama. What's the story behind that? What's your connection to Japan and having a school there?
So I can't remember how many years ago now, we were running out of a community hall. And my now dear friend Rena and studio director over there was living with a family, and the family's children were doing taekwondo at the same hall. And the father, Joe might be watching. Hi, Joe. He called me up and said, oh, I've got this student staying with me, Rena. She's a dancer and, would love to get involved. And ever since Rena came down to one of the classes, and ever since we met, we were, really close friends, and she helped me with the business for the year that she was here. And, ever since she's gone back, we keep traveling in between countries, and she comes over and performs in our shows. And yet a few days before she was leaving Australia, she was studying an economics degree, and sort of said to me, I've got no sort of interest in pursuing that. And, I want to start my own dance school. And so I said, well, why don't we make it a Two Shoes Dance Academy? And so I mentored her through, how to open the business and over the years. And she's done really well with it over there. And it's, they've got just a really beautiful, supportive families in their community over there as well.
That's a wonderful story. And for some of you watching may not realize that I actually used to live in Japan. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. I think I've been to Nagoya once, but because the school's in Nagoya, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
And it's an interesting exercise. We'll maybe get to this a bit later, comparing how things are operating in Japan to how they're operating here. I have a lot of insight about that, and it sounds like you do as well, Carolyn. But
yeah, very interesting after I spoke with Rena today. Yeah.
So why don't we start with, how's the pandemic actually affected like how you operate? Because I know that I've spoken with lots of different businesses, and in the small business, I did a small business live stream yesterday, and we were talking about the different types of businesses and how they've been affected. And some of them have been very, very severely affected by the pandemic, like restaurants and and I guess dance schools and many others, and then others have been able to sort of adapt and manage it okay. What sort of impact has all the restrictions had on your business and how you operate and your customers and staff?
I mean, it's just been huge, David. I have been grateful in a sense that we were able to pivot our business online, although it's not ideal having kids dancing at home.
I have the same problem with karate school. My kids go to karate and they're in the kitchen doing punches and stuff, and I have to be really careful when I walk around the corner or something. I might get a punch in the face.
Yeah.
I imagine it's even worse with dancing. You need more space, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, so things have, they're not getting proper training because things have to very much be done, only movements sort of that are very much on the spot and up and down. You can't do any of the traveling movements or corner work or things like that. It is quite restricted. So when I shut down the business before we were told to, simply because I, heard about this virus and what was happening, and thought, what, the best thing to do for the minute is just to, move us online. I've been very lucky with my business. I have a wonderful team of young teachers who are very, are amazing with their class plans. We did different themes to keep, the children engaged in their learning while they're at home. Their teddy bear picnics and things like this. But, a lot of dance studios are really suffered simply because some are sole traders. Maybe 50% of dance studios are sole traders. So the sole traders have just been annihilated with very little support, financial support from the government. As well, the way our teachers work, it's really interesting. They are our employees because I pay their superannuation, but then the way it works is that they're kind of like contractors. So they invoice us each week, their hours. But because of that, we weren't able to get any JobKeeper for our teachers. So that was really hard. So many have just shut down. Even in regional areas where they've just had no cases, but they've been under the same harsh restrictions as us. Yeah, it's just feeling like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, really. Especially some children, are finding online learning at this point traumatizing because it's really, it's like, well, why can't I be in my studio? Especially when things like the kids' football or basically everything else goes back for kids except dance schools. And then when they do get back, they're that heavily restricted. Some of our students still have to miss out. So it's,
I've heard a similar complaint. I've had a lot of dance schools, and not just dance schools, but also some, karate schools and that have a sort of, when you think about it, they're probably quite similar in the way that their business operates. They've had this complaint that, when we come out of lockdown, the restrictions are so restrictive that they can't really operate properly, or they can't operate at a profit, and it makes it really difficult for them to run a successful business.
Well, I'm hearing this across the board from every small business industry, David, whether it's restaurants, because it's one thing to have us in these, extremely harsh lockdowns for months and months and months. And then when we do reopen, we, can't trade properly. And for me now, it's like, even the difference between being able to allow, instead of having 10 kids in the class, even if we were allowed 15, it would mean that all the little dancers could come. Just that one little tweak would mean that all the, dancers, and for me, could go back to class. It's the fact that these children are missing out now. It's just.
So let's get on to okay, so we've just had a lockdown. So obviously we couldn't operate you couldn't operate your business during lockdown. But now that we're out of lockdown, today's the first day that restrictions have been relaxed a bit. Is your business able to operate? And if so, like, how is it going to operate?
Yes. So because dance is performing arts and it's education. And at the moment we're not even listed in the stage, in the restrictions. We're kind of lumped with physical recreation and sport, which we're not. And I forgot your question.
So like, now that restrictions have been relaxed a little bit.
Yeah.
How do we, is it possible to operate now?
Well, and what happens, because we are education, we have a certain amount of children that are enrolled in all of our classes. But because of these restrictions, I got on the phone with my team yesterday, we got on a call, and we just have to look at all the classes that, have too many children in them. And then we have to look for opening, in some instances, we can open extra classes for these children, and they just move, from a Saturday to a Thursday. We move who can be moved around. So it's this kind of game of, Tetris. But then some classes.
Good analogy, by the way.
But then it's heaps of work for us. And then some classes, it just can't be done. And, then we have to go on to this rostering system where, a few girls in a class each week, can't go back this week again. So it's like they've just had, some of them had just another 4 weeks off just recently. We open up again, we're shut again. And then these restrictions are there, and then they're eased. And then, so it's just this constant. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any continuity to it. It's always the goalposts are sort of moving, and, we don't know what's coming next.
So one of the things that I don't think we've spoken about this before, and I'm not sure if it affects you or not, but one of the things I've had, as I said, I've had a number of dance schools contact me with similar sort of concerns. One of the dance schools that contacted me was a ballet school, and they have a problem in that they're training older students, so 18-year-olds and this sort of thing, and they're training them to be professional ballet dancers, right? And they have to do exams. Those exams are very, very rigorous and require very, very strict sort of training in the lead up to it. And because they couldn't do that training for the exam. They couldn't do it last year, and they were really upset about it. And then this year they had the same problem. Do you have that sort of issue as well with people who want to do tests, or is it mainly younger students that doesn't really affect so much?
No, we have that. So This last lockdown, David, we missed last year's exams. And the weekend that this lockdown started, we've missed another lot of exams. So what I've got to do actually after we get off this call or this live stream, I'm going to, call the examination, body, try and see if we can get another date as soon as possible. Hope that we're not in lockdown again. Hopefully these girls, but we should be working on concert curriculum now. They should have done their exams, and we missed our concert last year. And then, who knows what's going to happen in November when we're planning to have our concert this year. And I've got one student, she's the most beautiful ballet dancer, and she's going to go so far, and, is planning to audition for the Victorian College of the Arts secondary school next year. I mean, hopefully there's some sort of consideration, within the industry for these students that are just being so heavily affected.
Yeah, because that was it was put to me, and, I didn't know a lot about how the dance curriculum works, but they said it's not like other subjects where you can just simply, change the date of a test, because you have to be training right up until the point of the test is what I was told. Otherwise you can't perform well enough, right? Because you have to train every day, and these are they're training for a professional career, right? It's not just a hobby or just something that they do for fun. This is what they want to be their professional career. And they were saying they couldn't do that training properly during lockdown in their homes, and they're not sure how they're going to make it up. And it was really difficult.
Yeah, and even with our students who are, younger and recreational, the teachers were saying, oh, what are we going to do? We just had their exam boosters over the school holidays, looking gorgeous, prepared, ready to go. And, now they've had a week off because we were told it was a 5-day snap lockdown. Then they've had some classes online. And so, yeah, I'm thinking they need another week or so in studio just to get their technique and their confidence back. I was training as a pre-professional dancer from 15 years old. What you're talking about, I couldn't even imagine what it's been like for these girls. Particularly, there's, dance studios, they have sprung floors. They've got lots of space because, children dancing at home, they could be dancing, on concrete floors, and well, hey, at least they're dancing. This is dangerous. This is why they have purpose-built facilities for studios and why the children need to be dancing in them.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. And I've heard that before as well. Like the flooring is like absolutely critical for, not injuring yourself and all of that.
Injury prevention. Yeah.
So moving on to like, when you first reached out to me, Carolyn, it was around, I think you probably got to the point where you'd had enough and wanted to take action, and you organised a protest and were talking to me about, what your plans were. And I think I said to you, it's pretty risky and you might get into trouble. And I actually attended, for those that weren't aware. And it was actually, I think I described it as the most wholesome protest I've ever seen. And the police did leave it alone, which is good to hear. But why don't you tell us about what led you to, get to that point where you felt you needed to make some sort of action? And it did get covered a lot by the media, right? Because it was on the mainstream news. It was all over social media. Independent people like Real Ruction covered it. It got onto Sky as well. So, I mean, it was covered pretty widely. So I think, from my point of view, it looked like a great success in raising awareness about this issue. But what led you to that point where you felt you had no choice but to take action?
Well, it's because when, we come out of lockdown, everyone else comes out of lockdown except for us. My son will be playing football on the weekend. There could be up to 80 children on, the football field, which is great. I love that. I want my son to be playing football. This is very important for our children's development. I don't want him to miss any more football. But, dance studios have just been, I disproportionately, unjustifiably, discriminated against in these restrictions. And it's not, these are children, David. This is children's education, children's mental health and well-being, which we are seeing deteriorating in the industry like we've never seen before. I just had to do something about it. And it was such a wonderful day. I mean, it was just so wonderful to have, people from our community coming together at the Arts Centre. It was completely safe, even though it was illegal what we did. And, it was just beautiful. I mean, the Arts Centre was just dead while they were having, huge crowds at the football. I mean.
Yeah, the inconsistency is a big thing, right? Like, I mean, I've had lots of people, and there's been lots of talk in the media as well about the current restrictions. They say you know, 10 people in a dance class, and, you know, there can be 100 people at the pub or a brothel or something. And then, you know, but you can't visit your friend's house. And, you know, like, we don't know the underlying reasons for all these things, but I think it's been a thing that lots of businesses have complained to me about, is that they're willing to make adjustments and do these sort of things, but it has to be sort of rational, right? It has to make sense. And I think a lot of people have said it just doesn't make any sense. Like, you know, like you said, like the football, right? And, you know, tens of thousands of people went to the football the other week, and it did end up transmitting disease in the end.
Putting us back into lockdown.
Yeah, and that was allowed by the government. And yet a dance school where the kids, you know, probably haven't been meeting a lot of other families and stuff recently. Well, they're certainly not allowed to, except outside of school. They can't go and learn in a dance studio. Whereas I think you made the very good point in your at the protest that dancers have to stay away from each other anyway, because otherwise they'll whack each other in the head by accident or something, right? So they have to keep their distance anyway.
Yeah, I think it was Charlize, that beautiful little dancer who was, you know, just stole the show, how beautiful and articulate she was. And you know, you can see a dancer. This is what this gives little girls, you know, they're smart, they're poised, they're confident. So yeah, at this point, you know, even having a young son, and why are children missing out on their education? Not even in terms of the dance studio. These children need to go to school, because if you know, like I said, if Kmart's essential, children's education is essential. And this is really a crisis now. The children can't do any more home learning.
No.
You know, the government needs, I know I've spoken about this before with your son, and, you know, that children just, you know, it needs to be, the government needs to work out how they can keep children in schools.
I couldn't agree more. You
know, the stress and anxiety that's being put on them, not to mention the fact that they're just missing out on months and months and months on top of each other of education. It's just untrue.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've had so many families, you know, parents contact me with, you know, all sorts of horrible stories about the situations that they're in. And, you know, I've seen it with my own children as well. I've got three young boys. You know, at first it's sort of a novelty staying at home, I suppose, but it wears thin pretty quick. And I think the kids now are, you know, they're starting to realize that they've missed out on, you know, so many things, and not just their mental health. Like, I think I said yesterday, like, at one stage when the pools first opened again, I went there with my boys. My boys love going to the pool. And so we went to the pool and stuff, but there's so many kids that were overweight. Like, it was, you know, because they haven't been using the energy. They haven't been running around with their mates in the playground. They haven't been doing their sports. They haven't been doing their dancing. They haven't been doing, you know, going and visiting friends on the weekend. And they just stay at home and eat and maybe go out for a few hours exercise a day. It's really bad for not just your mental health, but your physical health as well. Like, I guess we don't really understand the long-term consequences of this yet, but it can't be good.
No, it's from what we're seeing, from what I'm witnessing within my dance community, it's really not good. But I find that really interesting as well, you know, in terms of the obesity. A lot of young people, you know, not children, but younger adults that are obese are a lot more susceptible, you know, to hospitalization or death from this virus. And it's something that, you know, needs to be discussed. You know, I think it's negligent of the government not to be, you know, saying, well, we need to, you know, putting programs in for people, you know, I mean, it's not even discussed or acknowledged that this is a simple fact of this virus and who this virus likes to target. You know, that where's the wholesome approach, you know, exercising, eating healthy, you know, getting your vitamin D.
Yeah. And so, like, what do you think the government should be doing better? Like, you know, there's been you said that we were talking about the inconsistencies and things like this. And you mentioned just then, maybe they should be promoting that people do more healthy things other than, sitting in their house all the time. What do you think from a business owner's point of view, they should be doing better, like to manage all this?
The government needs to be working with our industry. This is 18 months along, and unfortunately, I don't see them stopping anytime soon. And,
have you tried to reach out to the government at all?
Yes, I have. Danny Pearson is the the Minister for Creative Arts and Small Business, and we're just getting treated with such a lack of regard. It's untrue. He's got my phone number. He should call me, reach out to me and make this right, because it would be the tiniest of little tweaks that wouldn't compromise anyone's health or safety, but, it would ensure the survival of our business. Because if it keeps going like this, what business can survive closed?
And so what sort of response did you get from the government?
Well, I've just been ignored.
Yeah.
You've been the only person, in Parliament that's been listening to me.
I've had so many people contact me and say that, oh, look, I tried to contact the minister for my industry and they just didn't even answer my email, just ignored me. And
that's disgusting.
I get that, ministers get lots of emails and probably lots of them are junk mail and probably lots of them are people with, weird ideas and stuff, but they're not all like that. And some of them are like real people with real concerns and, they're reaching, like if you're a dance school owner and you're reaching out to the minister responsible for creative arts and they just ignore you, like don't even give you a form letter back, it's pretty poor.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone they've tried to approach or work with anyone in our industry. So, yeah. It's
pretty disappointing. That's one difference that I have heard between Victoria and New South Wales. I've spoken to people in New South Wales. They've said that the New South Wales government has actually handled this a bit better. They formed like industry roundtable type things, and when they go into when they had restrictions, they get lots of representatives from each different industry, and they would give feedback to the government on things that they thought they could manage better and things like this. I don't think the Victorian government's done a lot of stuff like that
at all.
They even probably have for some industries, but others they've just ignored. Like, so dance schools is clearly one. And, martial arts schools is another one that doesn't seem to be getting a lot of love.
Yeah, well, because I noticed in the restrictions in New South Wales, they allow 20, when they're open, they allow 20 students in a dance class when they're restricted. And that's all that it would take for our industry, even 15 students. We just wouldn't have the constant problem and headache that we're facing that could potentially, see all of us shut. And I had something else to say, but I forgot what it
That's all right.
Maybe it's the difference between a Liberal government and a Labor government. I don't think the Labor government has even been, since this all started, working with the medical industry and the hospitals and all of that, perhaps as well as what they could be to, have seen what happened last year when we were locked in our house for 6 months, 8 months, whatever it was. Maybe that could have been avoided, rather than having doctors that were working in quarantine and working at the Alfred Hospital. This is just sort of basic stuff. And, if we're all at home not working, surely, they could restrict things like that to be able to, make sure the spread of the virus was, under control.
And one of the things that lots of people have complained to me about, and I know that you've spoken about it a bit, is the way that the restrictions and the easing of the restrictions are announced, because of course businesses have to plan, right? You can't just be told, you know, if I said to you tonight, all restrictions are being lifted tomorrow, you can't just open up your business tomorrow. You got to organise your staff, you got to organise your classes, you got to do all that, you got to prepare everything. And I think you said that, and lots of people have complained about this, is that the government seems to leak to the media before they tell the people. And then you find out through leaked media reports what's going to happen, and you're not quite sure if it's right or not. And, you know, maybe it's a rumor or maybe it's real. Like, how have you found dealing with all that?
Well, it's unbelievable. I mean, and it's just progressively, instead of this whole situation of going in and out of lockdowns becoming, you know, easier and you know, us getting more advance notice and things like that, they're just getting worse and worse. You know, at this last reopening, you know, I get the Herald Sun email at 10 o'clock at night, and I find out from there, you know, and still that day I was like, well, you know, the Premier hasn't really, you know, instilled any confidence that, yeah, things are looking like we're back on track for reopening. You know, we can't be 100% certain, but we're pretty sure, you know, things are looking good. You know, it was, you know, I'm getting the Herald Sun and going at 10 o'clock at night going, but then you don't know if that's right. If that's why am I finding out from the Herald Sun at 10 o'clock at night? I'm confused.
You can't act on that, right? Because like if you you know, let's say that you saw that at 10 o'clock at night or something, and you send an email to your customers saying, oh, we're going to be open tomorrow, and then it turns out to be wrong. I mean, you'll look like a goose and your customers will be upset and the kids will be mad. And
just bizarre. I mean, who are making these announcements now? Is it the media that are making these, you know, coronavirus lockdown restriction announcement to us? Or is it our government who's meant to be leading us through this?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm just going through some of the comments and questions here. So there's a couple of comments in here about the fear that the government's putting into people and how they're ramping up the fear. I mean, that must affect, you know, business confidence, right? Because you know, your customers might be thinking, oh, do I really want to sign up for another term because I'm not sure how things are going to go. You know, and that of course affects your business. Like, how do you think that's affecting everything?
Oh yeah, 100%. But then you've also got, you know, we're losing beautiful young dancers because they've had enough. So when we go into a lockdown, they're like, nah, I've had enough. You know, so we're losing students, and, you know, and then by the time we reopen and you know, have some new students coming in to try and you know, make up for kind of what we've lost, then, you know, then we're in lockdown again. And it's just, yeah, you know, we're at a standstill, or, you know, just going backwards. Definitely. Yeah.
So we're getting close to time, but one thing that I wanted to take advantage of is the fact that you've got this close connection with a very similar sort of business in Japan, which gives us this really, really unique opportunity to compare like what's happening in Nagoya to what's happening in Ascot Vale in terms of like what the government's actually forcing the schools to do. I think you said the schools have never been shut down in Japan.
No, they were shut for 2 months last year.
Yeah.
And that's they've only been shut for 2 months, and children only missed out on 2 months last year. They and it actually was really lovely because we were online as well. So we had all of our students come together, which was a really beautiful thing for online classes. So yeah, I spoke to Rena today. So they've only had 2 months shut. They do wear they do wear masks. They're anyway, I think because of the population, a society that does wear masks. And, you know, do social distancing to try and slow the spread of the virus. But, you know, the interesting thing was she said that there are some restrictions on gyms and sports clubs, but she said there's no restrictions, especially for dance schools, that owners decide, you know, owners take the risk management as to how many students they want in their classes. You know, that the government doesn't force any of this on them. And there's no, you know, no punishments. Like, what did we see it, you know, a man out in Echuca with his pub where there was, you know, there's no cases, and huge, what, tens of thousands of dollars that this man's being fined. I mean, it's just ludicrous. Yeah, I mean, the restaurants do, I think, close at 9 p.m. at night. She said that's kind of one of the only things they've got. But she said everything's running normally. And what I loved was she's like, the children are just having a normal life.
Yeah, so I've been getting feedback from my in-laws about, you know, what's going on in Japan. And they were absolutely shocked when I told them about mask mandates here and how you get a fine if you don't wear a mask. Like, the idea of fining someone for something like that's unthinkable in Japan. And businesses, I think one of the things that I really liked that Japan did, you know, they would have made mistakes the same as everywhere. But I think one of the things that I really liked that Japan did is that they focused very, very heavily on education and advice and recommendations from the government, rather than what we've done in Victoria with this great big stick on everything. So they had a lot of advice early on about masks and in what situations they were valuable. They had a lot of advice around businesses and ventilation, how you can manage ventilation in your business to make sure that fresh air is coming in, and you've got exhaust areas and where to put fans and that sort of thing. And they were allowing businesses to manage a lot of this risk themselves. So they're providing advice to the businesses. So rather than shut the business down, they'd say to them, okay, these businesses we think are high risk, these businesses we think are lower risk. For these high risk businesses, we recommend that you do X, Y, and Z. Some of the businesses voluntarily shut down. They just said, oh, we think we can't manage this, so we're not going to keep running. But a lot of the businesses just adapted their operations. What do you like? Do you think that we've gone too far? You know, some people have criticised Japan for that because they've said, well, you know, they should have had more restrictions or whatever. But I think we've gone sort of the other extreme, right, where we don't really let businesses make any decisions at all. We just say, right, you're shut down and you have to do this. Do you think that maybe we've gone too far the other way?
I think you know my answer to that, David.
Yeah.
You know, not only businesses, our lives are being micromanaged, you know, but to the point where it does, like, you know, my 80-year-old grandfather, tomorrow we're going to go and meet at a pub because, you know, I'm not allowed to visit his house. I mean, how is, you know, we need to be able to make our own decisions on what's right for us, our health and our families. You know, and the ventilations are, you know, if governments are really serious, this is the way forward with things like ventilation and what they should be looking into. If they're serious about us ever opening, you know, they should be giving government grants for businesses to put ventilation in. I mean, this is not rocket science. It's quite simple. Yeah, but it's just all gone too far. And it's clearly not working as well, David. They're trying to get this elimination strategy or approach. It's not, clearly it's a virus and it can't be eliminated.
Yeah, well, it hasn't yet anyway. And on the ventilation stuff, I think one of the interesting things that I watched a lot of videos that they were putting together for businesses in Japan, and the ventilation improvements actually don't cost much at all. Like,
no,
all they were doing is telling people to go to the shop and buy one of those cheap upright fans, and they said map out your building, your office space or whatever your workspace is, and figure out how the air is going to flow through it, and put fans in the doorways to push the air through and open a window so it goes out the window. Like, this is not expensive stuff. You know, like if you go to Kmart, you can buy one of those upright fans for $12. Like it's not, but like the government hasn't given any advice, as far as I'm aware,
No.
on ventilation or things like this. It's like they've just ignored it, and other countries are focusing really heavily on that.
Yeah, and I did that. Just made sure that the doors are open. The split system's on. I've got a fan in the foyer that I put in to push the air through. Are great. Masks, ventilation. But they're put in place so that people can operate, so that people can have their businesses open, so that they can, live their lives, so that their children get normality and things like that. It's all while we're doing all these things as business owners for everyone's health and safety, and yet we're just always shut.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but thanks so much for telling your story here today, Carolyn, and thanks to everyone that's tuned in. Please, if you're interested, you can go and visit Two Shoes Dance Academy's Facebook page. We'll put a link in the comments so that you can see that, and also Two Shoes Dance Academy Japan, if there's anyone from Japan watching. And I'm sure that you'll see more of Carolyn in the future anyway. Thanks very much for coming.
Oh, David, I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing for Victorians and, for the dance industry as well, advocating for us and for small business, for our children's future and everything. You're a wonderful man, David. Thanks so much.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, David.
All right.
Bye.